Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by WynnBET. I am your host, Mike Calabrese, joined by Mike Ianniello from the Action Network. And this, of course, is the G5 Deep Dive, which has been picking up steam the last couple of weeks. We just went 7-2 in our picks last week, including a clean sweep 5-0 week 6 for our G5 High Five round robin. And I'd like to also add, it was sweat free, which I did not anticipate, to be honest with you. The fact that all those games, other than Akron's, sleepy start where they're playing musical chairs at quarterback, it was pretty much stress-free. So I'm thrilled that we're in that position, back in the saddle. Our second G5 High Five round robin to hit in the first 6 weeks. How did that make you feel? Do moments like that make you want to bet more or rest on your laurels, Mike?
It depends. Probably. I mean, for me, it was tough because, funny enough, those picks were pretty much the only bets I won all weekend. So at least I'm making the people some money because I lost pretty much all of mine. I think I won like 4 bets and they were the ones I gave out on the show. So credit, at least the listeners got the good stuff. Like you said, though, the ones we gave out were pretty stress-free. I said it on the show. Bowling Green shouldn't be laying 2 touchdowns to anyone. That was maybe the most like no dub bet in the history of gambling. It's like Bowling Green minus 14.5. Yeah, no chance. So that was a lot of fun. That was nice and easy.
Now, 7-2 week obviously comes with some heroes attached to it. So there was more than a few to choose from. I'll go quickly on mine. I had Ball State plus 11.5 against the Western Michigan team that I had poked some holes in their resume. They weren't as explosive on offense. And Jalen McGoy, very first play, he was Mr. Explosive, 75-yard touchdown to get it started. Nothing like catching double digits and to see a first play touchdown go in your favor. He's the pride of Martin Luther King High School up in Detroit, the famous hometown high school of George Gervin, the Iceman. So love to see him showing off his wheels. He was a state record holder in the 4x200 meter relay, showing off those wheels early in that game. So a little bit of action, making it all happen for us. For those of you listening on YouTube and watching, Ianniello's got the Mac flag, the skull and crossbones flying in the background. We are all macked up and ready for action to really start in earnest next month. But hopefully we can keep picking winners as we go. Who's your G5 hero of week 6?
I'm going with, our guy, meet baby, Frank Harris. Usually we hype up Sincere McCormick. We both said that the Roadrunners were going to do just that, run all over, Western Kentucky. But they really, I think got over 100 yards, but it was the Frank Harris show. 28-38, 349 yards, 6 touchdowns. He went toe-to-toe with the Zap Dog, who we love, but I said it too. Western Kentucky's, that FCS offense is only beating an FCS team this year. Their defense is putrid. So Zappy's out here balling out, but Frank Harris matched him toe-to-toe. Not only did he cash our plus 3.5 that I gave out, but he helped cash the over, which you gave out. Double dip. UTSA is now 6-0 for the first time in program history. And I also want to add, it is an absolute travesty that they are not ranked. I think they're like 29th. They're behind Clemson and Auburn. How the heck is Clemson a better football team than UTSA right now? That is a joke. Rank the Roadrunners. Rank the Roadrunners. Rank the Roadrunners.
That perfectly plays into my best bet of the week. We went 2-0 last week. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Over 67, Western Kentucky, Old Dominion. And here's a fun fact about the toppers. They're the only team in the entire country, top 11 in scoring offense and bottom 11 in scoring defense. This is what I love to see. And when I look at Old Dominion, their stats, their resume, it's pretty bad, but they can do one thing at a barely passable level, and that's run the football. Western Kentucky giving up 211 yards per game on the ground. So we saw this formula work last week. They blew past it. I think Old Dominion could score 28 in this game. And Western Kentucky, as long as Bailey Zappi is slinging the ball around the yard, they're good for 42. So once this opened under 70, I was fast to jump on it. I would play it all the way up to 72.5. Is there any reason to pull back on the throttle for everything Western Kentucky related?
No. My only reason I wouldn't take it is just because I got burned last week because I took the Old Dominion Marshall over, thinking, they both run at a fast. Old Dominion runs at a very fast pace, which is another good thing that's good for an over. And I was banking on that last week. I had the over between Old Dominion and Marshall. A little bit of Penn State homer in there. Ricky Ronnie versus Charles Huff, two of the Penn State, offensive staffs when we won the Big Ten championship. But I love Ricky Ronnie as an offensive mind. They run fast, like you said. Western Kentucky couldn't stop, anybody. So I like the odds of it. You got Zapdog might put up 50 anyway. So you're like you said, you need 20.
Yeah, I mean, between him and Jarrett Stearns is legit playing his way into first team All-American consideration, which is insane to think. I was watching this guy on pirated ESPN3 feeds last year for Houston Baptist, and now he's going to be a decorated All-American. I think that's just one of the best stories in college football going. No disrespect to Zappy, who, essentially should be the NIL compensated winner from this podcast. We've been name dropping him for 2 months, but I want to make sure Jarrett Stearns gets the love too.
I also love talking about the Western Kentucky just because I love every time we say Zappy, Matt Mitchell has to put in a little zap bolt thing. So Zappy.
Pew, 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 pew,
Zappy.
pew. All right.
Zappy.
Enough with the sound effects. Let's go ahead for your best bet of week 7.
I'm going with an over 2. So let's hope this is an electric weekend. I'm going with the Ball State Eastern Michigan over 55.5. When I was going through my notes this offseason and making little notes for myself on every team, and big bold letters for Eastern Michigan, I wrote good offense, bad defense, take the over. And we've seen that. They had QB issues early on. They switched to Ben Bryant from Cincinnati. He has done better every week. He's been the starter. And the big thing too is they cannot run the ball. So they're essentially forced to pass it, which helps. And you look at Bryant since he took over the starter, 298 yards and a touchdown against UMass, 226 and 3 touchdowns against Texas State. Last weekend against NIU, 388 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he's playing better. They only had 38 rushing yards, so they're just not running the ball. So again, Eastern Michigan, we know what they're going to be capable of. We know they're capable of putting up points. And then Ball State was a team that I know we both were kind of leery on early in the year. It was, they had a lot of good luck last year in their MAC championship run. The reason I love this is strictly based on what I saw last week. And you were on it, so you knew, is Drew Plitt had struggled a lot early. They looked horrible. They got outgained by Western Illinois week 1. Penn State stroked them. Wyoming, Plitt was benched, and then you saw it start to pick up. Toledo, 190 yards. Army, 233 yards. Last week against Western Michigan, 310 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. So you can kind of see Plitt's building up after getting benched, which I like to see. So I'm just going to back on Plitt continuing to get better. You see Ball State starting to round into form. In the end of the day, both these defenses are horrible. Ball State ranks 109th in success rate on defense. Eastern Michigan's 123rd. I've seen enough from the offenses that I can trust them. Don't trust these defenses. Give me the over 55.5 in a little action.
It's nice to see Johannes Tyler really put it together. He had a big game last week against Western Michigan. So I agree. I think the passing game is fixed, certainly with a full max slate ahead of them. I don't think there's any reason to back off of an explosive performance on a weekly basis from that Ball State offense. All right, time for our transition into our G5 underdog parlay of week 7. It's time to get the mojo back. I suppose if you're going to lose one side of it, you might as well lose both, but let's not make that a habit. I'm going to stick here in Maclands. The Mid-American Conference has been good to us over the years, at least on a personal level for me and on the podcast this season. I'm buying on Kent State. This is a team I bought low on. I was a week too early, going up against Bowling Green 2 weeks ago. But last week, they were absolutely on fire. When you look at the performance from Dustin Crum, 479 total yards and 5 touchdowns against Buffalo. This, by the way, was a Buffalo defense that is not only one of your favorite programs in the country, but they held down Grayson McCall and Coastal Carolina. They held them to about half of that yardage. And they even did a good job defensively through the air against Adrian Martinez when they traveled to Lincoln to play Nebraska. So the fact that he just went off is a really good sign for this Kent State offense. And a part of their secret sauce last year offensively, and the reason why they were the top scoring team in the entire country, the caveat being they only played 4 games, but Marquez Cooper at running back, they need to have that balance. And he came into the season potentially embroiled in a running back by committee, which is sometimes disastrous from a fantasy perspective. It can also be difficult to get, continuity and momentum going as a feature back if you're always looking over your shoulder coming off the field. Last 2 weeks, 52 carries, 232 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. He's the bell cow now. I think this offense is right, and I think this is a spot where they're going to win outright at plus 210.
Yeah, I think this is a fun matchup between probably 2 of the best quarterbacks in the MAC. And like you said, it's almost similar to Plitt. I mean, Plitt obviously isn't as good as Crum, but where I was hyping Crum up all offseason as a possible, early round draft pick, that Carson Strong G5 guy that could work himself into the top couple rounds. And he did not look like it the first couple of weeks. And you finally saw it last week. He had done it all last year. He was balling out, airing the ball out all over the yard. Last week he started spinning it, and I think if he keeps that up, they're a dangerous team. I actually bet both these teams to make it to the MAC championship, so I'm kind of staying off because I want both of them to win. But like you said, I agree. I think Crum took a big step forward last week, and hopefully he continues that through conference play. For mine, this actually was a hard week for me where I really didn't have confidence in anything, which almost guarantees it's going to win because usually when I'm super confident, it has no chance of winning. I'm going to go with Air Force plus 170 against Boise State. I think Air Force just might be really good. They're 5-1. They've been crushing teams when they win, they crush them. Their one loss was a 49-45 shootout against Utah State, kind of a fluky game. But, as typical option, they lead the country in rushing, 341 yards per game. They're averaging 5.1 yards per carry. They have 24 rushing touchdowns on the ground. But it's not just that they're rushing a lot. They're good at it. They're 14th in the country in rushing success rate. Their little option duo with Daniels and Roberts has been working great, something that I know Navy's obviously struggling with as well. But Daniels is throwing the ball a little bit too, which is good. He's like a decent passer when he has to pass. Last week, he went 7 for 10, 110 yards and a touchdown. When you sell to stop the run, that passing attack, being just competent at passing for an option team is so dangerous because you can't stack the box. If Daniels can complete the pass, you're screwed. And then Boise State's been a weird team this year. They're 3-3. They lost to UCF. They lost to Oklahoma State. They just lost to Nevada. They're coming off a big win against BYU, which I almost think, you could have a little bit of a letdown factor here. BYU is a big physical team. Now you got to play a triple option on a short week. So, Boise State ranks 69th in the country in rushing success rate on defense. They're 99th in line yards, and they're 95th in tackling. So I really like, the struggles I've seen from the Boise State defense going up against this Air Force offense. And the Boise State offense has looked kind of one-dimensional. They can't run the ball at all. Their whole offense is pretty much just Bachmeier throwing it up to Khalil Shakir, who's awesome. But he's the kind of their only offense at this point. Air Force defense isn't great, but they're 8th in havoc rate. Boise's 96th at preventing havoc, and Air Force is 9th in tackling. So I don't think they're going to get burned, give up big plays. So I like Air Force in this spot. I think plus 170 is a good number for them. So give me Air Force.
We talked about this a little bit earlier in the season. It's interesting in the Mountain West, having San Jose State taking the title last year, Boise State in the midst of a coaching change. It's just a brand new era of Mountain West football in that the Broncos can play at a high level. I just don't have that same fear of a week in and week out dominating performance. And you got to pick your spots. But for a team that's playing as well as Air Force is right now, I agree. I think that this is priced properly to go in and take a shot on them. And when you pair it up, with my plus 210, you're looking at a very tasty payout. So I think that's a nice way to put together our underdog parlay of week 7.
The nice thing about betting service academies too is it's going to be close. They'll be in it. It's going to be slow. It's going to muck it up. It's rare that you see they're down by 30. This has no chance. You feel like you're going to have a shot kind of until the end, which I always kind of like as well.
And now it's time for the G5 High 5 round robin of week number 7. As we mentioned at the top, we hit it in week 6. We also hit it in week 1. And really, the thing that's impressive is that generally when you're putting these together, you want to put together some big money line favorites, take the pressure off yourself a little bit. Not us last week. We were going all sides, minus 110s across the board. But I'm going to get started. Maybe it's because I don't want to break up this winning streak, but San Diego State minus 350. And they're playing on a short week at home against San Jose State. And the reason that I really like them is the defense. It comes all down to their defense. The 9.5 scares me a little bit, a potential backdoor, because their offense is really vanilla. It revolves all around Greg Bell, and he needs to have 140, 160 total yards for the offense, really to get into that high 20s, low 30s in terms of output. But defensively, Kurt Maddox's defense is legit. No other way to put it. He was someone who cut his teeth at the FCS level at Eastern Kentucky, put together some really good defenses 3 years in a row, gets the call up to work for Brady Hoke last year. They finished 3rd in total defense, up to the same tricks this year. You can look at any of the metrics, and I know that sometimes people like to poke fun at Pro Football Focus, but I think they get more heat on a player by player basis, where they might say a top 4 receiver in the country is Georgia's, slot receiver who's only in for 20 plays per game, because they're rating him on every single pattern as opposed to holistically and how he looks, for the whole season. But when it comes to team coverage, And when it comes to ranking teams, on pass rush, on coverage score, on special teams, I think they do a really good job and the metrics are useful. And when you look at the coverage rankings, there's only two teams in the whole country that are ahead of San Diego State, and they both make sense. It's Iowa and Georgia. And when you watch the games, the eye test, it makes total sense to you. And the same thing when you watch this Aztec pass defense, they put teams in an absolute chokehold. In terms of their biggest step up in competition, they played Utah earlier in the season, a game that went to OT. They held the Utes to 4.4 yards per attempt. So this is as elite as it gets. You look at San Jose State, the defending Mountain West champs. They've already made a switch at quarterback. Nick Nash in there. He couldn't move the ball last week against Colorado State. I think this is setting up perfectly for a really boring and potentially stressful, 10-point victory for San Diego State, maybe a 27-17, 20-10 kind of game. But I think their defense is just so good that the prospect of a team beating them, scoring 3 touchdowns, getting into the 20s, getting turnover luck, it's just so slim. So that's why I want to build this G5 round robin around San Diego State minus 350. What are your thoughts, just kind of philosophically, about betting teams like Iowa, San Diego State, where the defense has to be elite to get those wins because the offense isn't going to bail them out? Does that make you more nervous than a high-scoring team with a leaky defense?
Yeah, I tend not to bet them. I don't know that I've ever bet a San Diego State game just because I feel like you can never tell with them. But I love this play for one reason only, is because San Jose State stinks. And I'm kicking myself because I wanted to bet their team total under coming into the year. I ended up not doing it. Everything went right for them last year. Everything clicked. So I was kind of down on them and wanted to fade them a bit. I didn't think they'd be this bad. Like you said, Starkel, I think he's hurt. I don't know. I assume he won't play. He's hurt. He wasn't good when he was in. And Nick Nash is now their quarterback, who was playing wide receiver for them at the start of the year. He was like the backup quarterback last year. Then he went to wide receiver. He was like Starkel's leading target early in the season. Now he's back at quarterback. They've looked really bad. So to me, this is more about, I would play this more as a fade on San Jose State than I necessarily would backing San Diego State. But like you said, you know what you're going to get from San Diego State. So playing a team that I do think is still kind of a little overrated because of last season, I like this play a lot.
And I may have misspoken at the top. It's actually being played at San Jose, which when you look at their stadium renovation, it kind of removes any home field advantage. Half their stadium is gone, more or less an empty parking lot. So that's something to consider. This has been a year where you've seen home fields really get on top of some teams. A lot of teams have struggled, year over year with false start penalties that you just didn't see. The Aztecs are not walking into a hornet's nest playing San Jose State in the Valley. So I'm going to go ahead with the Aztecs there.
I like it. For my first play, I'm going back to the well, pun intended. Miner Nation picks up, baby. We are riding with UTEP again. I don't know why. I don't know that anyone's ever bet UTEP as much as us, but they're off to a 5-1 start. Already cleared their preseason win total. I saw it's like the most they have more wins this year than they've had in the last 5 years combined. They are +7 at home against Louisiana Tech, and I like them in this spot to keep it close. We talked about it a lot last week. Hardison's playing a lot better this year. They're 31st in passing success rate. Jacob Cowing is awesome. He's gone over 100 yards as a receiver in 4 of his last 6 games. And what I like about them is the 2 games Cowing didn't go over 100 yards. Ronald Awatt went over 100 yards for rushing. So it's like when they don't have the pass, they lean on the run. Last week, Awatt had 159 yards and a touchdown. The Louisiana Tech defense is very bad, as they kind of tend to be. They rank 129th in passing success, 114th against the run. They're allowing 472 yards and 33 points per game. And, this Louisiana Tech offense has been pretty good behind Oklahoma transfer Austin Kendall. It just seems like every Oklahoma quarterback is playing awesome except Spencer Rattler. Austin Kendall's playing great. Tanner Mordecai's playing great. And poor Rattler's probably going to have to transfer. But anyway, so they're 27th in pass success, but they're just 116th in rushing, 114th in line yards. They're pretty one-dimensional, which I always like against a good defense. And the UTEP defense has been terrific. They're allowing 22 points per game, 300 total yards, both of which are best in the conference. They are 4th in the country against the run, 12th in tackling. So I expect them to totally take away this Louisiana Tech rushing attack, force them to throw the ball. If they can beat him with one dimension, so be it. But I like UTEP to keep it close here. They don't allow big plays. They're great at preventing finishing drives. and they've covered their spread in the last 3 games. I think they're still just undervalued because it's UTEP, and UTEP has historically been a dumpster fire, but they're really good. So I'm riding with Miner Nation here. Give me UTEP +7 against Louisiana Tech.
I mean, I love the UTEP defense. I think they've done just a tremendous job remaking their identity, being able to have those long extended drives because their running game is multifaceted with, multiple backs who can pick up first down. So I'm with you. We owe it to Miner Nation and UTEP to ride with them until the wheels fall off of this bandwagon, because
every week
they've been so good to us. Yeah, every single week they seem to be a winner for us. All right, I'm going to go bottom of the board here before I go even further off the board to a game that includes an FCS team. I like Akron +19.5. You talked me into it last week. I ended up watching a decent amount of that game, at least the highlights on YouTube. And after a slow start, I mean, what's going on with this Akron offense? Regardless of who's
their new quarterback, Zach Gibson, looked awesome.
They had Zach Gibson comes in, 3 touchdowns on the season, no picks. Cato Nelson starts the game, and he's someone who's been there seemingly since like 2015. And then DJ Irons, who clearly is their best option, he may be back for this game. So really, depending on the quarterback, it's still a play on for me with Akron +19.5. But what I'm waiting on is if DJ Irons plays, this becomes just a higher unit play for me across the board, because I think he gives them such a dynamic feature in terms of their offense building around it. Because he's, at this point, even with injuries, even coming off the bench at times this season, he's their leading rusher. He's got 246 rushing yards on the season. And as you mentioned, he did it, a big chunk of that damage against, I think it was Auburn they played in their non-conference schedule. So this is a team that I still think is undervalued. Obviously, it didn't move the needle much last week, winning as a huge underdog and not only covering the spread, but winning outright. I think it's time to kind of treat them like UTEP. And it's like, until they break our hearts, until they show that what they put on film in terms of their explosiveness offensively is not true, then why should we stop believing them? I mean, Kanata Mumpfield, 5 straight games with a touchdown, 2 touchdowns in the last game. So it's not smoke and mirrors. It's them getting premier quarterback play by Mac standards and going to their go-to receiver on a weekly basis. So like I said, just keep an eye on DJ Irons. It's someone that I've checked in on Fantrax, on Roto World, on collegefantasyupdate.com. Everything is undisclosed in terms of his injury. So you want to make sure to check that on Twitter Friday, Saturday, leading up to the game.
Yeah, I love that because, I liked him last week, and it was kind of for everything you said about the connection with how good Irons has looked when he came in. And I think too, if anything, what last week showed me, obviously I was a little nervous when Irons wasn't playing. I think Cato Nelson starting is a concern. That would kind of scare me off if we found out that was the case. But what we saw last week, which helps me, especially if Irons does start, is he is more of a dual threat. He is more of a runner. He can use his arm, but he's not elite. So what I like about this is, assuming they fall behind, I thought Gibson looked awesome last week against a Bowling Green defense. We talked about being they held Tanner Morgan to like 59 total yards, and Zach Gibson was tearing them up. So I like the fact that, to me, the ideal scenario, you start Irons. Hopefully he keeps you in it with his legs and his arms. If they fall behind, you put Gibson in, let him throw him back into it, backdoor cover. Boom. I love it. They show they have 2 good quarterbacks. So as long as Nelson's not in there, I feel safe about that.
All right, 4th slot here in the G5 high 5 round robin. What you got?
I feel like we're getting repetitive, but I don't even care because we've been winning. Going back to the boys, Fresno State, give me the dogs. Jake Haener, our boy, 4th in the country, 371 yards per game, 18 touchdowns, 6 picks. 4 of them came last week against Hawaii. He had a dud. They had a bye. Straighten that out. He's still completing 70% of his passes. Even after the bye, Jalen Cropper leads the country with 9 touchdowns. Josh Kelly's another good weapon. Ronnie Rivers is really good, but I still feel like we're waiting. We still haven't gotten that Ronnie Rivers game. We still haven't had the Ronnie Rivers 200 yards, 2 touchdowns game, which I think is coming. So that also kind of makes me want to keep backing them. It's really been all Haener, and Rivers hasn't been as good as we kind of expected. And Wyoming's a team I was very high on coming into this year. I really like their defense. I like their schedule. They were a team I was actually deciding between these 2 to bet to win the conference. I ended up going Fresno, thank God, because Wyoming has not been what I thought. They're 4-1. Good. You got to give them credit for that. Win your clunkers. But they beat Montana State by 3. They almost blew the Northern Illinois game, as we know, and almost split up the podcast. They beat UConn by 2, and UConn had a 2-point conversion to tie it late in the game. So they could have lost to UConn. And then they got smoked by Air Force last week. Their only convincing win was against Ball State, and they had 2 pick sixes in that game to kind of pull away. Their defense is good, but they're not as good. They're 37th in the country in passing success, but the best quarterback they've played all year is Rocky Lombardi, probably. So do we trust that? They're 73rd in rushing success. I don't trust their offense at all. And the Fresno State defense is fantastic. I know Haener gets all the credit, but they're 25th against the run. They're 3rd at creating havoc, 7th at preventing big plays. They have been awesome. Aaron Mosby and Kevin Atkins are absolute game wreckers up front for them. Safety Evan Williams has been a tackling machine. He's their leading tackler from his safety spot. He's just a force in that secondary. And I think this Fresno State defense is good enough up front to force Sean Chambers to beat them with his arm. And I don't know that he can. So I'm going to take Fresno State. They're 3.5 favorite. I don't really want to lay the hook, although if you wanted to bet it, I am confident in that as well. But for the sake of this round robin, I'll throw them in as a money line, -155. It's not a bad price at all. I think Fresno State beats Wyoming. I don't trust the Cowboys. So give me the dogs.
This is interesting because I do think the home field in this case is worth so much. If this was, being played in the Valley and Fresno State was the home team, I would be comfortable laying 13.5, like right up to that 2 touchdown mark. But going to Laradice in a place that's, there can be wind conditions.
I did look at the way. It's not as windy. It's like 7 miles an hour. I had to check that for sure.
That is good to know because Jake Haener, he's not exactly the most physically imposing quarterback in the world. I wouldn't say he's, has a pop gun arm by any stretch, but if I knew a little bit more about the injuries that he's been dealing with, it's nice that they had a bye week in there and that they can come in healthy. I still like them, but I agree. I'm just a little bit apprehensive, enough so that you don't want to get hooked in a game like that. So go in at -55, 155. I think that's a fair trade-off in terms of the value you're getting, and you don't have to worry about that backdoor cover. All right, for my last play here, this is one that is only living offshore. You're going to want to go ahead and check when Wynn Sportsbook puts this live. So I'm going to have to kind of give a caveat, where I would take this to. But I will certainly take the Yale Bulldogs +7.5 traveling to Storrs, Connecticut to play against the UConn Huskies, who are winless on the season, not a very good football team, don't have a head coach anymore. They got interim tags. This is a sinking ship. They got quarterback injuries. They just lost to UMass. And for Yale, this is the first time playing UConn since '98. This game matters to them. And on top of it, when you have an absentee coach, on the other side for Yale, you got Tony Reno, who's a great coach. Like I went ahead and did the deep dive on the Yale program. He was an Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year finalist about 7 years ago, where they combined both FBS and FCS, almost won National Coach of the Year. He's won the Ivy 2 of the last 3 years. He's done a great job offensively, but this team has been special right out of the gate this season for their defense. They're 10th at the FCS level in terms of total defense, 7.5 tackles for loss per game, and they've only turned the ball over twice the entire season. So even though they were breaking in a new quarterback, Griffin O'Connor is now their QB1, they're not seeing a huge drop off because he's not turning the ball over. And he's also doing a good job of distributing it. 4 different wide receivers with 10 receptions or more this season. My wife was knocking on my office door and I was like, honey, watching some Yale cut-ups on YouTube. And she said, well, at least have the decency not to lie straight to my face. I'm like, no, really, I'm watching Yale football in here. And I've seen enough. I think that the Bulldogs are going to be in this game for 4 quarters. If you can get it over 7.5, I saw it at one offshore at 10.5. Honestly, I think it's worth a sprinkle on the money line too, because football, for all of the arguments where the best players win, it's the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's. UConn doesn't have a very good team in terms of their roster build. They also have no motivation. And this is a sport that things can fall apart quickly if you're not playing with that intensity and you're not playing with that emotion, playing for your brothers and all those things that sound like cliches, but you see it borne out in the tackling and the blown coverages. I think you're going to see a lot more of that on Saturday. I love Yale here. Any number over 7, go with the Bulldogs.
I love the chemistry and, serendipity with this podcast, because I had the same exact conversation with my fiance last night, because I'm actually writing up this game for the Action Network site. And she sits down on the couch and looks at my computer screen and says, why the heck are you writing about Yale? And I said, I'm writing the Yale UConn game, which, by the way, is kind of exciting. Obviously, I'm from Connecticut, so this little nutmeg classic is near and dear to my heart. Like you said, haven't played since '98, 50th meeting between these two schools. What's kind of fun about this, but funny, is the sports gambling just launched in Connecticut this week. So but I don't think you can't actually bet on these teams if you're in Connecticut. They have the weird in-state loss. So the only people who could bet on this game are people like me who are from Connecticut but now live in another state, or absolute sociopaths if you're betting Yale UConn. But there may be money to be made. Like you said, motivation is the key here. Yale's a good team, Ivy League team. They're always going to play hard for their coach. UConn has given up on the season. And the biggest evidence to that, not only with Randy Edsall, quote unquote, retiring, but Kevin Mensah is the guy we talked about kind of early in this year. He is coming off, I believe, at least 2 straight 1,000-yard seasons, if not 3. He is 4th all time in program history in rushing yards. I think he's like 300 yards behind Jordan Todman. Obviously, Ronald Brown's still first, but he had a chance to move into the top 3 all time. They've given up. He has gotten less than 5 carries the last four straight games. He's been one of their best running backs in school history, and they've moved on because they're just giving carries to a true freshman now, who, to be fair, has actually looks pretty good, but they're going young. Everyone, all the vets get out. They're just going all true freshmen. They have totally punted the season. They're preparing for next year, and it's proven what they're doing. And like you said, Griffin O'Connor is, he's not a first-year starter because he didn't play in 2019 because they had a backup. But as a true freshman in 2018, their starter got hurt. Griffin O'Connor had to come in and finish the year. He won Ivy League Freshman of the Year. So they have experience. He is experienced, even though he hasn't really played in the last 2 years. Obviously, both these teams opted out of last season. Give me Yale. As Eric Matthews would call it, Yale. But give me Yale. I love the Bulldogs here. Back-to-back Bulldog picks, too.
Come for the Western Kentucky, hot talk, all that Bailey Zappi, lightning bolt, zing, 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 and stay for the deep cuts on Yale football. And really on Saturday, go ahead, make yourself a New Haven style pie, get that little stinger in the middle of the pizza, maybe some spicy honey, do whatever you got to do to get into the nutmeg flavor of the season, which really good pizza there on the coastal towns of Connecticut. I can attest to that, having lived there myself. It's going to be a lot better than the football, but I think Yale is the play here. So I'm happy that we're putting a bow on this round robin with a Yale FCS Ancient 8 play.
You get enough Frank Pepe's in you. You don't care who wins this game.
All right, that is it for us this week on the Group of 5 Deep Dive under the Big Bets on Campus banner presented by Wynn Sportsbook. For Mike Ianniello, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been an Action Network production. Thanks so much.